I wanted to scream. Now was not the time for fortune cookie wisdom. But he didn't say it wasn't worth it. My heart, it knew what it wanted. I quietly asked my father for a small loan. I came here for a reason, after all, to secure the upper deck rookie card of the next Mickey Mantle. Returning home empty-handed was not an option.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Bradley Hartmann. Now, I'm excited to bring to you today this episode, which you will hear is a little bit different because it's far more personal, and it is aged about 35 years, more or less, and involves a story from my life about a transaction that changed my life, changed the way I think about planning and preparation and intelligent thinking and forecasting the future and negotiation. All of these things were rolled up in this story that took place that I learned from my interaction with a local retailer and my father. Now, we will share that story and you will hear we are experimenting with some different ways to tell a story. Why? Because we want to push ourselves, and hopefully you see this investment we've made in this episode makes it a little bit different. And our hope is not only is it different, hopefully it is better. So you're going to hear this story titled Negotiating Maas, the baseball card transaction that changed my life. It's about me and my father. And after this story, you will hear a discussion between my father and I now about this story, about negotiation, about relationships in the construction industry. As always, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy it. Growing up in the Hartmann household in the 80s was one elaborate, endless competition. It most resembled a decathlon, one with dozens of events that would last the rest of my life. There was a basketball hoop in the street out front and a makeshift baseball diamond in the yard out back. In between stood our home, a miniature stadium of sorts. Our garage was half sporting goods inventory and half basketball court. A ball bin corralled 67 balls of every variety. 7 bikes stood sentry for our family of 6. In the basement, a blue tumbling mat served as the gridiron for a bloody, always my blood, as it turned out, competition between my brother and I. We called it the 3-yard fight. My brother scored lots of touchdowns. I did not. When my father returned home from the office, he always wanted to know 2 things. 1, what was the score? And number 2, who won? My dad interchangeably played the roles of coach, referee, and competitor, sometimes all 3 in the same event. Friends of my father who saw my brother compete often remarked how his firstborn son was a copy of his father. So that made me a copy of a copy, just slightly uniformly degraded, slightly younger, slightly shorter, slightly slower, and slightly weaker. This made our competitions more than slightly predictable. Yes, my brother and I were competing for touchdowns and baskets and homers, but more than that, we were competing for the attention and whatever drips of adulation were to be had. Remember, boys, my father repeated, the scoreboard, it doesn't lie. The Topps Mickey Mantle rookie card, my dad would often lament. I had it, boys, mint condition. Then I went away to play ball at Illinois State, and your grandmother, she threw out all my baseball cards. It's the one that got away. This was it. This was my chance to differentiate myself from my brother by blending sports and commerce, 2 passions of my father. I began to build a baseball card collection. I studied the Beckett Baseball Card Monthly Price Guide. I applied little stickers on each plastic card cover, noting the price each asset would yield on the open market. I rode my bike across town to Tom's Card and Comic, and I became acquainted with the owner of the same name. My father, he received periodic updates on my progress. He'd nod along, giving off a whiff of approval and a smirk. I was committed to finding my era's Mickey Mantle rookie card. The lost dreams of my father would be found through the focus and determination of his second son.
The great number 7, Mickey Mantle.
I had just finished reading our weekly Sports Illustrated. In it was an article about this legend in the making named Kevin Maas. I sprinted to the bathroom and I slammed my fist into the door. "Dad!" I screamed at the top of my 12-year-old lungs. "Dad! Dad!" I heard a groan followed by movement. Dad, we must go to Tom's Card and Comic Shop right now," I yelled. I had to get on the ground floor of this surefire Hall of Fame career. "For cry-eye, quit screaming," he chastised me as he opened the bathroom door. "What's the matter?" "Dad, we gotta go to Tom's Card Shop right now," I blurted out breathlessly. "Kevin Maas, rookie card, 15 homers in fewer at-bats than anyone ever, including Mickey Mantle." I followed him into the family room. He settled into his pink-plaid chair. "Kevin Maas, eh?" he said. "Yeah, he's been tearing it up." "Exactly," I yelped. He knew all about this guy. "And you what? You want to buy his baseball card?" "Well, yes, his Upper Deck rookie card," I said with confidence. I didn't want to invest in just any card. I've done my homework. My father must know I've done my homework. I decided to lay it on a little thicker. "Dad, it's going to pay for college in a few years. You'll see." Right. Of course, he said. I pointed out the obvious. "Dad, no other 12-year-old is reading Sports Illustrated, so I've already got to jump on the competition." "Okay, sure," he began. "But are you just competing against other kids here?" Now, the legitimacy of this line of questioning, it escaped me. Well, yeah, Dad. Only kids collect cards," I said confidently. "You always talk about having an edge. My edge is I read every Sports Illustrated every week, just like you." He just stared right through me. So I continued. "And if I know things they don't, I have an edge." My father took a deep breath. "Okay, is Tom the only person you can buy this card from? Because my IT guy, his name's Dan Fahey, he's plugged into these message boards with his computer and they play this thing called rotisserie baseball." My father was now speaking in tongues. I could have him ask his friends if they have a Kevin Maas card to sell. Now, my dad knew as well as I did, there are only 2 sources of Upper Deck baseball cards. One, purchased by the pack at Jewel Grocery Store at the exorbitant price of $1 per pack, or 2, through Tom, the only card shop in town. "Dad, buying them by the pack and hoping to find the Kevin Maas rookie card," I explained patiently, "would be 10 times more expensive and still not guarantee that we'd actually get this rookie card." "Well, you're right," he conceded. "What are you willing to pay for this Kevin Maas rookie card?" Now this I had not deeply considered. I scratched an imaginary itch behind my ear. "Well, Beckett has it listed at 75 cents, so I'll offer him that." "Okay. And if Tom won't sell it to you for that, do you have a plan to negotiate?" Okay, now I saw what the old man was doing. He was testing me. My father was in sales and he was generous with his corporate wisdom. Just last week, my brother and I, we survived a rather lengthy monologue on overcoming objections. These tedious questions from my father were a test to see if I could identify objections and then overcome them. "Yeah, Dad, my negotiation plan is whatever it takes," I said with more than a little bravado. "You told us that one time about that Mexican guy who burned his boats? Well, that's what I'm doing here. I'm burning my boats. I'm all in." "Okay," so my dad said, "you've done the research on the frequency of rookies coming out hot only to struggle the second half of the season?" Now, this oddity was more of a statement than a question, so I simply disregarded it, and I played my trump card. "Dad, let me ask you a question. As a 12-year-old, what would you have been willing to pay for the Mix 1952 Topps rookie card? His smile betrayed something, but I was uncertain as to what exactly. Okay then, he said, let's go see Tom. My dad said something about desperation and caring, but not that much, but I was already out the door. I burst through the doors at Tom's card and comic shop. Other than baseball cards and comic books, it appeared Tom also collected wood paneling. It was on the ceilings and floors in addition to the walls. My father, he followed shortly behind me. With my Beckett in hand, I coolly informed Tom of my intention to secure the rookie's card. Highlighted in orange and circled in blue pen for good measure, I showed Tom how much the experts at Beckett valued this card. Now, Tom sold the Beckett magazine, so surely he would respect the rational estimators of value at the fine publisher. Do you see, Tom? It says right here it's worth 75 cents, but I will buy it from you for $1. My father pursed his lips and cocked his head as if to say, how about that? I rolled my eyes. Yes, I was offering Tom 33% more than Beckett. Tom nudged his Mr. Magoo glasses higher on his nose and nodded. Okay, let me see if I've got it in the back. I turned around and I beamed at my father. It was happening. It was all happening right here. Now, whatever happens next, my father said, just control your emotions, okay? A scene flashed in my mind. My dad, he was on the dais somewhere. He had a microphone. The kid, he wasn't even 12 years old yet, I tell you, he memorialized. Yet, he recognized underpriced value and he acted boldly on his instincts. That young and determined boy, my Bradley, he was a boy of action. I snapped out of it. My daydream was pierced by the return of Tom. He had the card. It was in a thin plastic sleeve. There was a small sticker in the corner on the plastic. Dealing it on the glass counter like it was a game of blackjack, Tom simply said, $9.50. Bile, it raced up my esophagus. Dang it! I had already negotiated against myself, unnecessarily increasing my opening offer from 75 cents to $1. My bottom line, which I was prepared to pay after some good-natured haggling, was $3.50. After all, Kevin Maas was a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer. Yes, I expected a premium, but this? I glanced at my father. He gave me a standard, now what are you going to do? Look, with a mini shrug, eyebrows arched. But Beckett says, I blurted out to Tom. He cut me off, knowing where I was headed. Beckett published that months ago. The next edition will reflect the card's real value. Maas, he's the hottest thing in baseball since the kid, Ken Griffey Jr. I turned to my father. Dad, what do you think? Is it worth it? It doesn't matter what I think. Do you think it's worth it? If you do, then it is. Value is subjective. Price is just an opinion. I wanted to scream. Now was not the time for fortune cookie wisdom. But he didn't say it wasn't worth it. My heart, it knew what it wanted. I quietly asked my father for a small loan. I came here for a reason, after all, to secure the upper deck rookie card of the next Mickey Mantle. Returning home empty-handed was not an option. My dad informed me the cost would be 3 free lawn mows, including the weed whacking with that yellow piece of junk whose spool always came off. Dang it. Now I was negotiating against 2 grown men. This outcome was unfathomable. Fine, so be it. Okay, I said, let's do this. I shook hands with my father first, whom I now oddly felt some competitiveness for. Where the hell was that coming from? Then Tom, who in mere minutes transformed from a wise friend to a soulless vulture. But Kevin Maas was now mine. The deal was done. In the coming weeks, Maas lived up to a steep price tag as he continued raking his way through the American League. Kevin Maas finished second in the Rookie of the Year voting to Sandy Alomar. Extrapolating out a full sophomore season of Maas domination, the MVP was all but assured to him. he'd pile up 45 homers and more than 100 RBIs. His rookie card would then be worth double what I paid for it. All I had to do was wait and enjoy the ride. The wait, it turned out, was horrible, and the ride sucked. Maas went 1 for 2 with a homer and 2 walks in the 1991 season opener against the Detroit Tigers. Then he went into an absolute free fall. Kevin Maas plunged, anvil-like, from Mickey Mantle comparisons to those of Mario Mendoza, the major leaguer best known as a 200 hitter. Then the idea hit me. Why didn't I think of this before? I'd simply sell this card back to Tom. If Beckett was always running behind, I could get my $9.50 back, and I could move on from this Kevin Maas surefire Hall of Famer ridiculousness. This guy wasn't worth that now. Not to me, he wasn't. He was a hack. Dad, I yelled. Dad! Dad! He opened the bathroom door, stone-faced. His zipper was down. Come on, Dad, let's go. We gotta go. We gotta go back to Tom's right now. Let's go. Now, please. Time was of the essence. 5 days later, my dad agreed to drive me back to Tom's. The plastic cover embracing Maas still had the sticker on it. As we pulled out of the driveway, he said, the number one rule of investing is to not lose money. Right, I said. That makes sense. And yet, investors do this all the time when buying stocks, he explained, knowing full well my limited knowledge regarding stocks and whatever bonds were. He continued, they get all excited and they buy a stock when it's doing well, but then they sell it when the price goes down. Now, nothing he said did not make sense. And that's why it's called buying high and selling low. And that's a guaranteed way to lose money. Does that make sense to you, Bradley? It did. I nodded. Okay. Then at what price are you going to offer to sell the card back to Tom? $9.50. Oh, okay. Then what's the lowest price that you'll sell it back to him? Well, I said, I don't want to lose money, so $9.50. My dad laughed at me. So, son, there's risk in assuming your negotiating partner, Tom in this case, is an idiot. No, I don't think Tom's an idiot, I said defensively, although I sincerely hope Tom would prove to be an idiot, at least in this case. Because last time he pointed out how Beckett takes time to update its pricing, so it only seems fair. I paid more for the card then, he should pay more for it now. It only seems fair. My dad, he now repeated my words back to me. That was definitely a bad sign. What would have to be true for you to keep the card, at least for now? What would have to be true? I now repeated his words back to him, buying some time to figure out what he meant. Smoke was forming between the cogs. My mental machinery was grinding. Well, isn't there a point where I should just cut my losses and move on? I blurted out instinctively. At this point, we sped by Larkin High School. We made a right turn. We'd pull into Tom's parking lot in less than 1 minute. Yes, Bradley, there is. He paused and displayed a small, sad smile. Control your emotions. I want you to care, but not that much. And remember, Tom isn't the only person on earth you could sell this card to. If my dad was trying to pierce my optimism, it was working. How would one even begin to care, but not that much? What does that even mean? And now what? My all-knowing father knows of some global baseball card market for third-string left fielders? All right, we're here. Get out, my father instructed. Hey, Mr. Tom, I announced as the bell on the door continued its faint jingle behind me. I'd like to sell you back the 1990 Rookie of the Year runner-up, Mr. Kevin Maas. Tom was eating sour cream and onion potato chips. I thought only kids ate that stuff. He set the bag down on the glass case and wiped his hands on his brown corduroys. I thought kids only did that too. Tom cleared his throat and then he waited a beat. Okay. I purchased it here not long ago for $9.50. Look, I said, pointing at the sticker. Right, Mr. Tom said. I'll buy it back for 50 cents. I swallowed hard. 50 cents, Mr. Tom? Listen, Mattingly, he's healthy now, and Kevin Maas is barely batting his weight. I had no idea how much Kevin Maas weighed. I knew I weighed like 79 pounds, and that Tom, at least in this case, was not an idiot. No thanks, Mr. Tom, I said respectfully. Tell you what, Tom said as he picked up the card. I'll give you $2 for it, but only because you, Bradley, are one of my best customers. Fair? My chin began to tremble uncontrollably. I sunk into the front seat of my dad's Buick. My chest heaved. My mind spun. It was a tiny dam holding back a swelling river in a 100-year storm. Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. I know you won't believe this now. My father started in softly, but you received a ton of value in there. Don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. Seriously, some big life lessons in there. Name one for me, will you? The dam broke. The people at Beckett are dumb, stupid liars. I wailed through sobs. It was hard to know where the tears started and my snot stopped. My father remained in park. He let the surge pass. Look at me, my dad then said. I couldn't look at him. Hey, buddy, look at me. I ran my nose down the length of my arm, from elbow to wrist. A straight line of something would remain visible until washed out with tide. Then I looked up, ashamed. I imagined myself through his eyes. What a loser. A copy of a copy. At least my brother isn't around to witness this meltdown, I thought. My dad then said, hey, I'm proud of you. For reasons I couldn't explain, I started bawling all over again. My dad waited patiently. What felt like an hour later, I returned to something resembling emotional control. Control your emotions, please. And we both laughed. Listen, I'm proud of you because you tried to make something happen. Nobody bats 1,000, in baseball and in life. But the learning, it's always optional. I exhaled, exhausted. You cannot be afraid to fail, to make something happen. But you have to be committed to learning from the outcome. Otherwise, you'll go through life making the same mistakes over and over and over. And as crazy as it sounds, a lot of people do. He then explained the counterproductive role emotions play in negotiating. He rightly identified how my excitement led to an irrational belief in Kevin Maas's future dominance despite a tiny sample size. In baseball and in life, Bradley, you gotta remember the law of large numbers. Over time, things tend to average out. He talked about the importance of planning before any negotiating, determining an initial offer, a target price that you'd be happy with, and the number at which you'd simply walk away. My dad then said he'd give me a book on negotiating that he read from some consultant who lived near us in Chicago. His name was Herb Cohen. Herb's favorite line is this: care, but not that much. What do you think that means? Don't be desperate. Don't want the deal so much that you do something stupid. A smile as big as the windshield appeared on his face. Hey now, he does listen to me sometimes. I was glad to feel my body laugh. You must remember there's a big difference between list price and willingness to pay. Just because someone prints a price on it, it doesn't mean that's what it's worth or what someone will ultimately pay for it. Right, I said. And I'm guessing by the time I read Sports Illustrated, then everybody else already knows about it. My father chuckled. Yeah, it's safe to assume that. There are very few secrets in life that you'll be able to read about and act on for profit. By the time you read Sports Illustrated or Beckett, all the people that matter, they already know that information. Now, reading is always a good idea, but assuming what you read is unknown to others, well, that is dangerous. My father then pulled out of the parking lot, headed for home. Dad! Dad! I winced. Just a few minutes of solitude in the bathroom after work. Is that too much to ask? Dad! Dad! What? I asked my 12-year-old, chuckling with annoyance. Can you help me? Can you help me buy this card off eBay? He blurts out. It's Javier Assad. I know you love the Cubs, and he's a great pitcher. He's going to be Rookie of the Year. I nod, listening. The kid then lays it on just a little bit thicker. He'll probably be a Hall of Famer, too, if you think about it. The card is a P10, and it only costs $9.50. Oh, okay. Only $9.50, I say sarcastically. We should buy 3 of them. I toss my son a book. He catches it. Oh, come on, Dad. Just buy it for me, please. He tosses the book back at me. So what? You wrote a book on negotiation, and in it you told some boring stories about Grandpa. No one cares. No one reads anymore anyway. Come on, just buy Javier Assad for me. Please, please, please. I think to myself, I'm glad I never acted this way. Listen, I tell the kid, if you want to buy a card, then that means you want to negotiate. And eBay, it's a great place to do just that. What if I told you that we could buy Javier Assad's rookie card for less than $9.50? He just stared at me. I reach over his shoulder into a bookshelf. I then handed him another rookie's baseball card. The thick plastic case is the kind you'd buy if you owned a 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle rookie card. Whoa, this is from 1990. My son's jaw hung open. Publishing a book doesn't impress my kid, but a baseball card does. Go figure. Dad, this is ancient. This was insulting, but somehow sweet. He held up the card for me. But Dad, who's Kevin Maas?
Another drive to deep right field. Going back is Kester. This is gone. Another home run for Kevin Maas.
Meanwhile, Richardson scores. He gets 1 strike on Mantle, and there it goes over the right field fence across Bedford Avenue and deep into a parking lot.
Sammy goes back, looks up. You can't put him on the board. A 2-run homer by Kevin Maas, and it's a 7-2 ball game.
And now I'd like to welcome my father to the show. Dad, thank you for being here. Let me take you back. It's the summer of 1990. Your second oldest son, me. I'm 12. There was a very pivotal moment during that summer that changed my life, and it was around negotiation. Do you remember any of the details?
1990? Don't have a clue.
You have no clue. Okay. What if I was to tell you it involved sports and an athlete at the Major League Baseball level? Does that ring any bells for you at all?
Rings no bells.
No bells. Okay. What if I were to give you this little plastic enclosed baseball card? Ring any bells now?
Absolutely none.
What do you have in your hands?
I have a baseball card with the name Kevin Maas.
That's
Kevin
right.
Maas.
It's Maas.
It's Maas.
Kevin Maas, Upper Deck, rookie card. Rings no bells for you because this event changed my life and you were the lead character in this. I got nothing.
I can remember nothing about it.
All right. Well, you have a lot of kids. I'm sure my siblings had relationships with you that you remembered everything. But anyway, all right. So we're talking about negotiation here. You've been in a lot of negotiations. And despite the good-natured ribbing, Dad, you've taught me a lot about negotiation. If I were to ask you, what are like the 3 most important principles in negotiation that you've learned, or maybe you wish you had learned earlier in your career, or you would pass on to someone else that wants to improve in negotiation, and you had to share those in reverse order. So number 3, then number 2, and then number 1, where would you start?
I would start on having a comprehensive knowledge of our company's profit and loss, knowing what our delivery costs are, knowing what our handling costs are. Okay, just being able to know as we walk in where our bottom line would be, and hopefully we wouldn't be approaching that. On the other hand, where a deal would be marginally or maybe even highly profitable.
So in the book, I share kind of really understanding your own cost drivers in your business, but when we're selling to builders, this concept that we talked about when I was at Pulte was the total cost of ownership, which is also understanding what's our cost to serve, but also what is it like for them and what are the main cost drivers on their side of the business? Is that similar or the same thing of what you're talking about?
Very much, very much. Just again, knowing every aspect of our business and, what those expenses are down to, the decimal point.
Did you ever find when you were in the role as a vice president of sales and marketing, did you ever question whether or not the people that are working for you, if they truly understood the economics about how much money you guys actually make and what type of business we have to really have net profits?
Yeah, I think, again, we had a very experienced sales team, just at all the locations where I was fortunate enough to work. There's no question they had an understanding. Did they know the intimate details? No. And as salespeople, were they driven by needing to make the deal? And that maybe was more of an overriding factor for them than what the true profitability of the deal was going to be.
Let's flip it. Did you ever find that builders you were working with, did you ever find or sense there was any misunderstanding about how profitable your business was and what type of margins you applied to the products and services that you provided?
Absolutely. In many cases, and again, it would typically be a less than experienced purchasing rep. It almost seemed as if they understood or felt that our margins were similar to theirs, which clearly in the building material end, depending on the product, framing, very low margins. You were happy to get anything close to a double digit. Millwork margins, yes, they would be double that. Okay, maybe in the 20s, but there was we felt one of the hurdles we had to overcome was that our customers we were dealing with in that negotiation felt that we were both on equal footing margin-wise, and we clearly weren't.
Yes. I've often found that too, is there's often this understanding that you guys are over here just getting filthy rich, and then we're trying to scratch out a few pennies here and there as builders, and that is not the case. All right. Love it. That's number 3. Let's go to number 2. What's the number 2 most important principle or lesson you would share?
Going in, it was very much wanting to make sure that the agreement that we could reach would be a win-win. My feeling was, in most cases, we were dealing with people whose business we had for a long period of time. They were friends. But at the same time, when we understood that they had a business to run, they had profits and margins they need to hit. But it was going in saying, okay, a good outcome from this will be, okay, a win-win for both of us, a level that we could accept and one that we felt would be more than fair to them. Again, we had an understanding of where their competitors were, particularly in Chicago. Most of the top 20 we did business with. And we made sure that we were fair in our treatment of each and every one of those customers, recognizing that these people had to turn around and compete with each other.
Right. So did that lead to preparation for a negotiation where you were saying, all right, we're going to come in here. I half jokingly talk about my time at Pulte. In the first hour, when you become a purchasing manager at a national home builder, they tell you the first rule is, regardless of what the pricing is, just tell everyone they're 2% high and just see what happens. That's kind of a joke, but not always. And sometimes they were high, other times they weren't. But there was this sense of like, I'm going to assume we're 2% high, or I'm going to come in, I'm going to make some concessions. But then would you specifically kind of plot out that if no new information or concessions come to light, we know where we're going to start. I know where we'd like to find the win-win, but I also know what's my walk-away number.
I think, again, particularly with customers whose business that we've had, our approach was pretty much to go in with what we thought was a fair number. We knew that, okay, did we have a little wiggle room? And if it was important for our customer to feel like they won, we were prepared, okay? In most cases, okay, could we give a point and a half? We weren't start high and be willing to, drop considerably. That wasn't our approach. And also we had the benefit of knowing where everybody else was. What was the price level that we had out, basically to the rest of the marketplace. We knew that was a number that worked in most cases. And so again, it was important for us to make sure that, yes, the numbers that we arrived at, we could live with. And at the same time, we very much wanted to make sure that our customer felt like they got a good deal.
All right. And number 1, what's the number 1 principle or lesson from negotiation you've learned in 4 decades in the business?
Close to 5 decades. My number 1 was being willing to listen and being open to an alternative. Some cases we had customers said, what if we could ship this product direct? What if you could ship that window package to us direct? Okay, clearly having a comprehensive knowledge of our costs and expenses, I knew, okay, if we don't have to handle delivery, that's 4 or 5 points we should be open to giving back to them if they're willing to receive them in a fashion that will enable us to be more efficient.
I know this probably never happened, but maybe. Can you think of one example where you violated that very principle of listening that stands out in your mind that could kind of solidify how important it is for people listening?
Yeah, I have one good example. I was working for a large building material supplier in Fort Lauderdale. Overwhelming majority of our business was single-family residential, some multifamily, but we did no high-rises in downtown Fort Lauderdale or Miami. Those kind of scared us. We thought they were big volume. We heard bad things about some of the general contractors in terms of payment. Anyway, one of my salesmen came in, and again, this time this was, first decade, 2000, things were booming.
Obviously pre-crash.
Okay, pre-crash, didn't need a ton of new business. Salesman comes in. One large, well-known national general contractor was in need of a millwork supplier for a 40-story building in downtown Fort Lauderdale for millwork. My boss, the owner of the company, wasn't keen on that type of business, but in support of the outside salesperson.
Was it just too much risk?
Too much risk.
Okay.
Too much risk. How are we going to get the product up there? Oh, to compound it, it was a supply and install. Okay. While we had contacts, obviously, with lots of carpenter contractors and labor providers, that wasn't our niche. Long story short, initially I told the salesman, I don't think we're interested. He came back and said, hey, well, they really want to talk to us. And I went in kind of with my backup. We prepared the numbers. They were fair numbers. They weren't exorbitant, but again, they were very profitable for us. And the volume was substantial. I went in and first comment I made to the VP of construction was, I'm not changing my numbers. And he looked at me and he said, I didn't ask you to. He accepted our numbers on the spot. It ended up being a highly successful project, win-win for everybody. And I felt like 2 cents in the process. And I thought, you know what, I should have handled that a little bit differently. Should have gone in listening to what their needs were. We would have arrived at the same point, but I didn't have to make a fool of myself and in front of a customer who end up being a very good customer. We did subsequent high-rise projects with them in South Florida. Just learned a good, valuable lesson.
I think that is an example, though, that we all struggle with personally and professionally. There's this assumption that price is the most important thing, or you and I are going to battle over this, whether we're buying a car or buying an air conditioning unit or selling a high rise full of millwork and installation. There's this overriding assumption that my price is going to be too high. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. But I've also had the experience of fretting over this and feel like I have to go into battle. And then I submit it and they're like, all right, this looks great. Let's go. And then you have the opposite horror. Like, oh my gosh, how much money did I just leave on the table there? Mm-hmm. Also probably missing a lot of those. So, all right. So that's very helpful. These are important lessons here. I'm going to show you this one more time, Dad. Kevin Maas, 1990 summer, changed my life, changed who I am. You were a big part of it. Nothing. Am I getting nothing here?
I don't remember the name or the picture.
Other than that, the fact that I've held on this like a talisman of the lessons you imparted with me. Well, anyway, Dad, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Brad.
All right then, friends, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed this episode titled Negotiating Maas, the baseball card transaction that changed my life. I hope you enjoyed it. This was both a labor of love, but also extremely difficult. The other episodes that I do aren't nearly this personal. And I really struggled just to read what I had written in kind of the telling of the story. We invested more in what they call sound design with our friends who help us do this. And I think we're going to be doing more of these. So if you have any feedback, good, bad, or otherwise, we'd love to hear it. Because again, I know your time and attention is valuable. Do not hesitate to email us. I will read everything that comes in at info@bradleyhartmanandco.com. 2 N's in Hartman. info@bradleyhartmanandco.com. So if you enjoyed this, you want more of this, or you have ideas on how to make it better, or I don't know, if you're like, hey, Hartmann, this whole thing kind of sucked. I like the normal ones where you have a guest. So do more of those. Hey, we do this for you. We want to grow our audience, and we want to do exactly what we say in our tagline. We want to deliver value first. So appreciate you listening. That's it. I'm going to close out with a thing I just said. You are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.